All right, we are live on YouTube. Still about a minute and a half out to start.
Hey, Chris, I know we're going to start soon. I did send the PDF to you, regular email, and
Okay, now I got it. Just saw it.
and I sent the PowerPoint to your Gmail address.
Okay, great. Yeah, we just got a new email filter. I wonder if it's acting funny or something like that. Yeah, all right. It should be fine. So there may be, as I mentioned, a brief delay in when I introduce you to getting the slides up. But we should be fine.
Got it, Chris. Thanks.
Okay, we'll start in about a minute here. Well, good morning, everybody. As you can see, I'm clearly not MMAC President Tim Sheehy. Tim had a scheduling conflict this morning, and I'm Chris Jenkins, MMAC Communications Director, filling in for Tim today. And welcome to the Business of Metro Milwaukee. This monthly webinar we do has two goals. First is to better provide you with insights that help you make better business decisions. And the second is to inform you of the challenges and opportunities to growing the region's prosperity. Today's program is sponsored by United Healthcare. MMAC has partnered with United Healthcare to make it easier to find a health plan that works for your employees and your bottom line. United Healthcare's level funded plan offers coverage for companies with as few as 5 employees, allowing smaller and mid-sized companies to take advantage of things that are typically reserved for larger companies, like underwriting for more competitive pricing, better data so you know where your premium dollars are going, a potential surplus if claims are lower than expected, and access to critical illness, accident protection, and hospital indemnity plans to provide further financial security for your employees. In short, it's a great benefit plan to help you recruit and retain talent in this challenging environment. And I guess the best plug I can give for this program comes through the 565 companies who have signed up over the past 9 months to provide coverage for more than 19,000 employees and their dependents. An MMAC affiliated broker can help you receive discounted rates. Contact your MMAC broker or visit MMAC.org to learn more. So we'll begin today's program with a discussion on the critical aspect of addressing the racial disparities we see in the Milwaukee region, increasing opportunities for diverse-owned businesses to become a part of supply chains. Joining us in the first half of the show are Marjorie Rucker, Executive Director of the Business Council, or TBC, and Ugo Wabarocha, President of Diamond Discs International and Chair of TBC. And then at 11:30, we'll be joined again by Dr. John Raymond for a healthcare update and a discussion now on how he and the Medical College of Wisconsin staff have approached the evolution of their policies throughout the pandemic. And as always, we'll take your questions, so enter them in the chat. So Ugo, Marjorie, welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Marjorie. Good morning, Chris. How's everybody?
Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. So Marjorie, let's start off for people in the audience today who may not be aware of TBC. Tell us a little bit about the organization, its mission, and its work.
Absolutely. So the Business Council is a 501c3 organization that facilitates the growth of ethnic and diverse businesses in Wisconsin by fostering win-win procurement relationships. So we do this in 2 capacities. One is really building the capacity of the minority-owned businesses by providing readiness for the supplier diversity space. And then we also work with corporate partners to navigate the benefits of working with minority and diverse-owned businesses. So that's who we are and what we do.
So Marjorie, tell us a little bit about your journey as well. How did you get involved in this?
Yeah, so I graduated from law school in 2003, came back home, learned this fancy term called community and economic development, and I've been here for the last 18 years. So I started my career with the King Drive Business Improvement District, worked at Business of Milwaukee, Forston, and then came over to the Business Council where I've been, rocking it ever since.
Absolutely. So Ugo, tell us a little bit first about the one hat you wear as president of Diamond Disc International, the journey you took to get to that position, and also how you got involved in TBC.
Definitely. Great questions. And again, thank you for having us here today. So yes, president owner of Diamond Disc International. Diamond Disc International, we're a national wholesaler of construction tooling and equipment. We specialize in infrastructure tools and materials. We've, now kind of looking at it, we've been a business. I've been a business owner now for 15 years, and out loud just kind of, just makes you look back at the entire journey of being 15 years as a business owner here in Milwaukee and Wisconsin. But no, I've been in the industry, in the construction tooling and equipment industry for decades now. Had the opportunity to purchase the company that I was the district sales manager for in 2007. And 2007, 2008, at that time, we were in the general contracting, the home building market. And I think everyone knows what happened in 2008 with the recession with the home building market. So it was a baptism by fire. We looked at literally hundreds of businesses going out of business on a weekly basis, us not just pivoting, but evolving into road construction, infrastructure construction, and supplying to those industries. And then now fast forward, being able to survive through the pandemic. So in dog years, I think I'm like at 40 years or 50 years as a business owner, but it's been an amazing journey. It's been an amazing journey here in the city of Milwaukee, state of Wisconsin, especially as a diverse owned business owner. The lessons learned throughout the way. And also, it's made me even more passionate becoming chairman and leadership roles I have for diverse business ownership and diverse business ownership growth within our region.
So my next question is for both of you, and I'd like to get both of your perspectives on supplier diversity is a term we hear a lot. What does it mean?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. So let me tell you what it is and it is not. Supplier diversity is not a DEI strategy. It is not a diverse equity and inclusion strategy, but it may be a part of a company's overall strategy. So I just want to make that point, because when we say supplier diversity, we've been talking a lot about, inclusivity, right? And diversity and equity, but supplier diversity is a little bit different in that, it's a part of an overall strategy that, deals in the area of procurement. However, it is not, the only strategy, or it's not the umbrella of DEI. But the technical definition is this. So it's an intentional and strategic decision by a company to include or increase the number of underrepresented groups like minorities, women, service disabled veterans, and LGBTQ businesses into their procurement processes. Okay, so that's the technical definition of supplier diversity. The other thing that I think I should note with supplier diversity is these business relationships are usually longstanding. They are not one-off contracting opportunities.
Great. And then your perspective on that?
Yeah, definitely. I concur 100% with that Marjorie said, and I want to piggyback off of that. It's a tool. It's a tool, and I think one of the key words that we look at for supplier diversity, economic inclusion. When you look at underrepresented groups, underrepresented businesses from these underrepresented communities who've been excluded from these business revenue generating opportunities, resources, historically for, we're talking about for centuries, how do we have tools? And again, it's just one tool. And that's, I think that's one thing that I just want to kind of reiterate that Marjorie said earlier. It's one tool. It's an essential tool, but it's only one tool that we look at as far as how do we continue to build those opportunities, access for underrepresented communities to participate, have visibility of some of these opportunities, being able to build strategic networking with relationship opportunities with major corporations. But yes, it's one tool, and definitely, as Marjorie said, promoting proactive business programs that that for the purchasing, procurement of goods and services from businesses from underrepresented and underserved communities.
Yeah, Ugo, that's such a great point that it's one tool of many that we'd see out there, but specifically in terms of supplier diversity programs, and I love each of your perspectives on this one too. How do supplier diversity programs help build a more vibrant community of diverse-owned businesses here in Milwaukee?
Yeah, that's great. So I'm going to say this: supplier diversity is necessary to build vibrant, diverse business communities and our communities here in Milwaukee and southeastern Wisconsin. So I always say it like this: if you don't see businesses, strong businesses in communities that look like you and are participating in the economic wealth creation of said community, your communities are failing. So supplier diversity is really, really important, especially for southeastern Wisconsin, because when you have strong, vibrant businesses of color or of underrepresented groups, it creates that quality of life, if you will, that we're looking for. I'll also make this case in point: corporations, I should say, that participate in supplier diversity and do it well usually see a higher return on their investment from those business relationships. So there's a study out there by the Hackett Group that a lot of people reference, but for every $1 million that was spent with diverse firms, that company received in their profit share 3 times back of that, right? So I put out $1 million, I'm doing business with these diverse businesses, not as a set aside or whatnot, but really just because this business can offer me what we need. The prices are competitive, they're high quality, they just happen to be from an underrepresented group, right? So I get to count that, but as a result of that, I'm also making more money. So that is, the great thing about supplier diversity, and kind of helps to get people's wheels turning when they think about it or participating in it, because that's important as well.
Yeah, and then Ugo, your perspective on how it helps build a more vibrant community of diverse-owned businesses in Milwaukee.
Marjorie's spot on, and the exact number that I have, and again, Marjorie's always 5 steps ahead of me. On average, supplier diversity programs add $3.6 million to the bottom line for every million in procurement operation costs. So again, it's that huge myth, that huge misnomer as far as what's diversity. It's actually good for business, and that's one thing that really resonated, especially as chairman of the business council, when we're able to have those conversations with, being very fortunate to also be part of the MMAC board, talking with our board members, is that it's good for business. So a recent report shows that minority-owned businesses contribute $400 billion to the nation's economy and over 2.2 million jobs. So again, as Marjorie mentioned, it's an investment. It's not, we think about, charitable and philanthropic and a lot of times, unfortunately, these, which are both great causes, but a lot of times they get convoluted and mixed together, and they're different. This is a business, there's a business reason why supplier diversity is good. And as Marjorie mentioned, it's major corporations, and some of the most successful corporations in the nation, if not the world, it's not a coincidence that the majority of them have mature supplier diversity programs, because what they realize is that the communities that they serve, that it's important for these communities to thrive and to do well. And these supplier diversity programs, often are able to, generate this type of business within these communities. And as these communities do well, they're able to do more business and provide more services and or products in these communities also. And we're in the NBA playoff season, so I got to quote the great Magic Johnson, who's become a great business owner also, and said, that there is you can be successful and profitable in diverse communities, and also do things that are good for the community at the same time. So it's doing what's right, doing the right thing, and it's also profitable and good for business. And I think that's something, as Marjorie mentioned, is very important for us to reiterate.
Yeah, we can talk about the NBA playoffs, but we're not going to talk about the refereeing last night.
Yeah, no, we won't talk about that. But also, I also want to circle back to something that Marjorie also mentioned, I think, which is really important for supplier diversity. Marjorie mentioned the visibility. So when you're seeing successful businesses in your underrepresented, underserved, diverse business community, you're seeing that success. But it's also about having visibility on the corporation side, because whether it's corporations or whether it's the state of Wisconsin or city of Milwaukee or the county, when you have major organizations, and we're experiencing this on the state side of the Department of Transportation, where a lot of times we're prime or prime contractors or prime road builders will say, hey, we don't see them. We don't have visibility. We don't, there's and major corporations, again, going back specifically to our conversation, major corporations, hey, we're not able to find any diverse businesses. So that's where it just really becomes imperative. The amazing work of Marjorie Rucker as the executive director of the Business Council. I'd be remiss not to mention also as chairwoman of the Ethnic Diverse Business Coalition and the many great chambers that are out there, and that, but they do an amazing job, especially when we're speaking of the Business Council and MMAC, to give visibility to our major corporate partners of the amazing diverse businesses that are there. And then these corporations giving visibility of opportunities, right? What do we see forecasting coming down in the next quarter, Q1, Q2. And again, when you mentioned earlier about being a business owner for 15 years here in Milwaukee, some of the most successful supplier diversity programs, the first thing was the educational piece. When you sit there at a Advocate Aurora Health Health Summit or symposium or WEC Energy Group symposium, and they're able to talk about upcoming forecasted opportunities to do business, to engage. So you see the visibility of the opportunities. Secondly, when you see how to engage these corporations and do business with them, that's so meaningful for diverse businesses that normally do not have visibility or access to this information. And then last but not least, obviously encouraging not just first tier, but second tier, third tier, diverse, their contractors, the people, not just that organization, but the people that do business with that organization, how they can interact with the diverse business community. And that's where the Chambers of Business Council does an amazing job with their supplier diversity module, engaging, having that education, that information exchange, the strategic networking opportunities. And last but not least, as Marjorie mentioned, it starts with just that visibility. Both in the room, again, the diverse business community and the corporations having the visibility of each other.
I think it's really enlightening that each of you brought up the business case for this, that you can establish a diverse supply chain and profit because of it, because we know that through all the work we've done on Region Choice, there's so much solid research about how diverse teams within companies make better decisions and make more money because of those decisions. And do you think we're seeing something similar play out with companies that use diverse suppliers?
Absolutely. Yes, that is the case, right? So normally when you use a contractor or a vendor or a device or a supplier, you're doing it because it makes good business sense, right? So you're putting out competitive bids, you're looking for the best price with the highest quality of return, right? Small businesses can offer that, right? Diverse businesses help, again, the overall effect, right? It helps the community that they're in as well as the corporation's bottom line. So when you look at it, it is absolutely the same thing. It's just that you're contracting with a vendor outside versus doing the, thinking inside and having your team come up with that solution. We always tell diverse businesses when we're doing our module, what value are you adding to that corporation, right? What problem are you solving for them? They're obviously looking for someone to solve it because they can't get it internally. So then it's your job to go in there and show that value add. Of course, any business can do that. But again, with diverse businesses, it's helpful, threefold, because not only is it helping to build the capacity of that business and make them stronger, it's also helping to build your capacity and to make you stronger and to operate and do the things that you need to do. And it's just a win-win for everybody. Yeah.
Definitely agree 100%. Yeah, definitely agree 100%. And I'll just add, again, piggyback off what Marjorie said, one thing that I learned as a business owner in the past 15 years, and I can speak specifically for Diamond Disc International, is that we'll have diverse businesses, and Marjorie knows where they may do one or two things. Again, they don't have the, mile wide, but they may only be 2 feet wide, but they go way deeper. They go 500 feet, or they go half a mile deep. And so you have diverse business owners that may do one or two things. They may have specified niche markets that they do extremely well. And I'll even go a step further, confidently from experience, to say they punch way above their weight class in what they do, because they don't do everything, but they do one or two things extremely well. So I'll fast forward that, whether you're looking at a corporation or you're looking at a state project, a state bid, I mentioned that obviously construction, but they won't do a bunch of things. But when you're able to break out one or two things and then give them access to the visibility of that opportunity, of that product, or that service, and they can, you have that relationship building opportunity. What the corporations realize, like, wow, we've got, 20% savings on this specified area, and now this organization, again, this diverse business or small business in general, can't invest in everything, but they can invest in doing this one thing extremely well. And as they do that well, guess what? Now that the relationship is there, and then now you start expanding and start saying, hey, what else can we do? And I'm speaking this not just hypothetically. It's not just this is real life. This is what Diamond Disc International did. We started out with diamond edge cutting tools, having one of the largest inventories in the region. And because of the relationship opportunities that we were able to build with some of the largest utility contractors, not just locally, but nationally, and we're able to establish the trust, able to establish, as Marjorie said, diverse business owners, small business in general, but diverse business owners, as Marjorie said, know your value. And I'll go a step further, know your value to the industry. If you're in the healthcare industry, know the value of your company or product to that healthcare industry. If you're in the construction industry, infrastructure, know your value. And then, because you don't ever want your certification or your diverse business classification to be your go-to move, but it's going to give you an opportunity for you to show your value proposition. And when when you know your value proposition of the industry, it becomes a much easier conversation for you to understand this corporation and where this corporation is going, to say, you know what, now I can provide this value for this corporation. And now I have this access. So you get doing one thing well, leads to two things well. And then as it grows, now we're doing, as Diamond Disc International, as many know, we 2017, 2018, we bought a larger facility, went from a 5,000 square foot warehouse to a 15,000 square foot warehouse. And the reason why I mentioned that is because that growth and expansion wouldn't have happened if we didn't have the opportunity. Now, predicate the opportunity was before that we knew our value proposition to the industry. But again, both of those things need to be there as a business owner. You need to know your value to the industry, and then it's imperative that we get that access and the opportunities and organizations like the Business Council and our major corporations that provide these access to opportunities to provide these strategic networking, relationship building opportunities.
Marjorie, we had a good question from an audience member, curious about what sorts of products that TBC affiliated businesses sell. And I guess I'd add services in there. And it's probably way more than people might think.
Yeah, absolutely. Our membership, we have over 110 business members currently, and we span 36 different industries. So, it's one of those, give me a call and let's see if there is something that can work for you. But yes, we do currently serve 36 different industries right now.
So in your role, you can connect businesses that have a need or want to reach out
Absolutely.
with all sorts of different things across different sectors. That's great.
Yes.
I was curious because I mentioned MMAC's Region of Choice program. For people in the audience who don't know, it's a program, an initiative we launched in 2019, and our initial focus was on increasing opportunity for individual employees within companies for both being hired and advancing people from diverse backgrounds. But as we went through and did the work, we found out that that's not enough. We need to address, one, education, and two, supplier diversity. So I guess I'd ask each of you, how does the work you're doing, and I know you and Marjorie both have worked closely with our Region of Choice initiative, how does it intersect with our Region of Choice program?
Yeah, I'm going to defer to Ugo and let him do it. He's the troublemaker, good troublemaker, right? That helped to steer that at the MMAC level. So definitely go ahead.
Well, it's not easy, right? It's a tough process to try to figure out.
It's a tough process, and thank you, Marjorie, for that. But again, this is not just not just myself. There are many great people, including Marjorie, who made this possible. So again, as I mentioned earlier, I'm also fortunate to be a board member, honored and humbled to be a board member of the MMAC. And during this pandemic, we had some very tough conversations. Obviously, as this pandemic impacted everybody, the entire country, if not definitely the entire world, and the business community was detrimentally impacted. That I think we all agree that the diverse business community, as well as how the business and small business community was impacted, the diverse business community was even more detrimentally impacted. But there's several concerns came to the forefront, and to me, the conversation that I've always had, I've been very consistent over the years. I've been a champion for the diverse business community for decades, and so my voice got louder, and the conversation became a lot more distinct. And what I love about it was the fact that the MMAC and the board members there, some obviously great people that I have tremendous amount of respect for. They leaned in. Could have used other organizations. There's some tables that don't want me at the table anymore because I got louder. But what I love about the people that I respect, we had some difficult conversations, but we both leaned in and we were very respectful. And again, talking about business case for it. And it was real simple. It was the importance of a thriving, diverse business community. I on one hand think it's very important, and I would have the conversations to talk about why it's important, and having these conversations with again several a lot of people that I have tons of respect for across the board. We're able to have respectful conversations and move it forward and start understanding why a thriving, diverse business community, not only why it's important, but also how and why the MMAC needs to play a visible, an active role with quantifiable metrics of how they can lean into to move this forward. And so going back specifically to your question, the region of choice, it falls directly into the region of choice. When you talk about attaining top corporation, when you talk about having the city of Milwaukee being globally competitive as a place to live, work, play, you can't have us being last on the list of place to raise an African-American family, to raise a business, the list goes on. When you have a thriving, diverse, ethnic diverse business community, the importance of that from a business standpoint is, as we talked about earlier, thriving corporations have mature supplier diversity programs because their communities are doing well. Last but not least, one of the big things you mentioned earlier for the region of choice is retention of top talent, whether it's diverse or not. And one of those things that are important is again, when you have ethnic diverse corporations that are thriving and doing well, guess what? That also attracts not just those corporations, not just those companies, but also the corporations that are doing business with those ethnicities, those ethnic groups, where they say, we need to have more people that we can have so that we can, that we can do well with this group. But last but not least, to me, most importantly, a thriving, diverse business community invests in its own community. So you talk about education, you talk about healthcare, you talk about, and again, when you're looking around, looking at my alma mater, University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, we've had some great names that are there, including the Lubars, who've done some amazing things. But the list goes on as far as when you have people who are doing well in your community, they invest well. Same thing with ethnic diverse business. So to me, the overall, for when you talk about all the things that are important for the region of choice, being globally competitive, this becomes very important. You can't have a two-legged stool. You have to have so again, this is one of the imperative components that you have to have if you want to have a successful region of choice. And again, this was something that the conversation that we had and we're able to move forward with, whereas the quote that I have that's unapologetically tied to me, it's not just important about who you hire, it's about who you do business with. And everybody leaned in and Fortunately, they agreed. But again, we can't do it without great folks like Marjorie Rucker of the Business Council that are providing an avenue, an opportunity, the technical development, the business development for our firms, and also preparing them. Being able to have that connection with the major corporations. As Marjorie said, reach out to her. If you're Ascension or Advocate Aurora Health or Northwestern Mutual, and you're looking at, reach out, and again, Marjorie, like I said, has a group, a listing of all of our membership and the industries that we have, the strengths, and people will be surprised how many industries that we have. And we have the same thing as president of the National Association of Contractors, where we have major construction firms that have no idea as far as some of the demonstrated strengths that we have within our existing diverse business relationship. Zach Comes did an amazing report. I think it's very educational and informative, and I encourage all of our TBC and MMAC members and our major corporate partners to read it. Again, I was even enlightened when Zach Comes came back and identified 1,200 Black and brown businesses within the Metro Milwaukee area. But I think there are a lot of things that were identified in that report that again show the strengths and the opportunities, and again the reason why this is so important for the region of choice. I mean, these two things go to be hand in hand.
Absolutely. It's a great perspective. About a minute left before we transition to Dr. Raymond, but Marjorie, before we go, I wanted to give you a chance to talk about a grant that TBC recently received.
Yeah, so let me take my minute to do this, and then whatever time I have left, I'll talk about the grant. So if you are a business or one of our corporate partners that has a supplier diversity program but wants to make it better, right, or you want to enhance it, please call the Business Council. Our number is 414-287-4172, or you can email me at mrucker, it's RUCKER, at MMAC.org. Again, it's mrucker, so RUCKER at MMAC.org. We also have a roundtable that we're going to be launching. This roundtable is for companies that don't have a formal program, but you really want to be a little bit more intentional around, right, bringing in bringing in more diverse suppliers, however that looks to you. So we will be launching that roundtable as well. We're actually in the process of getting our members involved in that now. So that's a more immediate call, but please give us a call as well, 414-287-4172, or email me, because our job at the Business Council is to make sure that businesses understand and know what they're getting into as far as embarking on this space, because it's not as easy sometimes as just saying we're going to do it. There is some intentionality that needs to be held, but it's not hard, nor does it have to be different. It just has to be intentional and strategic to make sure it's a win-win for the company as well as the vendor that's going to be working with you. So I don't know if I don't think I have any time left. Maybe I got like 10 seconds before.
Give me 10 seconds on your grant.
Yeah, for the grant. So yes, I was the lead troublemaker, but I had 20 other partners too that helped to advocate for an earmark, if you will, from the state of Wisconsin and their American Rescue Plan Act funds to help ethnic and diverse businesses throughout the state. So we were successful in securing $86 million to go to different ethnic and diverse chambers, as well as community development financial institutions across the state, for us to really do that work that we need to do to make sure that our ethnic and diverse businesses are competitive, they are strong, and that they can do business without a lot of hiccups. So that's all I got for the grant.
That's great. Marjorie, Ugo, thank you so much, first of all, for your leadership in this space. It's so important to the future of our region. And second of all, thank you so much for taking the time to share your perspectives with us today.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank you
having me, Milwaukee. Have a great rest of the day.
Amazing.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. And we'll bring in Dr. Raymond now. And if you can give me a minute to get our slides up and ready. Dr. Raymond, welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Thanks, Marjorie and Ugo, for your presentation. And Chris, thanks for doing double duty today. And
of course.
I have two parts to my presentation today. The first is a 3-slide update on where we are with the COVID-19 pandemic. And then I want to just talk briefly about MCW's experience with COVID-19 and managing our workforce and our other stakeholders. So if I could go to the first slide, Chris. Most of our indicators are trending slowly unfavorably and maybe moving unfavorable a little bit faster the last 10 days or so than we'd seen in the previous 2 months. So you can see we're averaging well over 1,000 cases per day. And please note there is a mistake on this slide. Under the 1767 7-day average, yesterday we actually had 1,087 reported, not 236. So I apologize about that. And the numbers are trending upward. We're probably underestimating the case counts because our positivity rate is substantially over 5% and climbing. And that's not surprising. After a little over 2 years, people know a lot more about COVID. There are readily available high quality at-home test kits, and people just may be quarantining or self-isolating based on the kit availability. And those do not get factored into the numbers that are reported by the Department of Health Services. We know that we're moving in the wrong direction because the reproductive number is greater than 1. It's actually been greater than 1 now for about 8 weeks. And you can see on the bottom, the Milwaukee numbers reflect similar trends, the average of 335 cases per day with almost 400 yesterday, 12.3% positivity rate, and are exceeding 1. We also know if you look at county level data and use the CDC risk calculator for the risk of contracting COVID-19 from incidental contact with other individuals indoors, a number of our counties moved from low risk to medium risk, and many of the low risk counties are trending toward that medium level of risk. Next slide, please. On this next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about deaths and hospitalizations. Thank you, Chris. We still have just single-digit deaths being reported in Wisconsin, and there is some variability in the numbers that are reported. So it's difficult right now to say that there is a trend. It appears to be relatively flat to possibly unfavorable. And because the case numbers started to visibly tick upward about 2 weeks ago, really wouldn't expect the deaths to start being measurably increased until maybe another week or 2 down the road. So we'll be watching that carefully. Hospitalizations also are going up, but they're still relatively low. 288 total hospitalizations with COVID in Wisconsin and 40 in our intensive care units. Totally manageable. We can take care of people regardless of whether they have COVID or not right now, but the numbers are moving slowly in the wrong direction. Our ICUs are running at a little over the optimal operating number at about 85.6%. We'd like that to be closer to 75 to 80%, but plenty of capacity available. And the same for hospital beds. Typically, you want to be in the 80 to 85% range, and we're running at 88, much better than we were running in January and even in early February of this year. And here in southeastern Wisconsin, only 21 ICU beds used, and the trends right now appear to be flat. So all in all, we're a very manageable place with the COVID-19 pandemic. Would ask people, though, to continue to practice some mitigation measures based on whether they're indoors and interacting with large numbers of people, because folks are taking the masks off and we're congregating more than we were even a few months ago. And COVID-19 is still with us. And the Omicron sublineages that are emerging are clearly more contagious, and they're getting more and more contagious. So if I go to the next slide, just looking forward, people are asking, what's going to happen in the next month? And the honest answer is we don't know. If you look to Europe, there's huge variability in the pandemic burdens in many of the countries, even countries next to each other. So for example, the United Kingdom never saw a full recovery from their January surge, and they had a pretty significant uptick here with BA2. Although now they're trending favorably, and they basically have no public policy mitigations. They're wide open. Spain, on the other hand, with a very high vaccination rate, never had that second surge. And they're watching carefully, but it doesn't look like they're going to have the emergence of a wavelet or a mini surge anytime in the near future. Germany really never recovered from their Delta and Omicron waves. You can see they had a little tiny uptick from BA2. There may be some BA4 and 5 mixed in there, but they're still at a very high community transmission rate. And then you look at the US, and as I said, for about the last 8 weeks, we've had a slow rise. It was steady until about 10 days ago, and now we can see in some states a clear uptick, but I would call it a wavelet or a mini surge, and not necessarily the kind of surges that we saw earlier, and we hope that that trend will continue that way. So I'd like to pivot to talk a little bit about MCW's experience during COVID-19. First of all, I just want to remind everybody, we're a large company. We have $1.3 billion of revenue. We have over 6,000 employees. We're the 7th largest employer in the Milwaukee metro area. And we've got about 3,000 learners on our campus. And literally many thousands of people come into our business settings on a daily basis. So I'll just start by saying it was a lot easier for us to know the right things to do at the beginning of the pandemic than it is now when we're trying to establish a new normal. So at MCW, from in January, actually, of 2020, before we even had the first case of COVID in Wisconsin, I established a task force of infectious disease experts, epidemiologists, clinical and education leaders, people that represented our core business functions and our community stakeholders to try to prepare for what we thought might be some challenges that could emerge in 2020. And I also want to point out that we are an educational institution primarily, but we are physically connected to Froedtert Health through skywalks and to Children's Wisconsin through tunnels. And that we literally have thousands of transits back and forth every day between the office and education space at MCW and the frontline healthcare environments at Children's and Froedtert. And we had to factor that in. Also, many of you may not know that almost all healthcare provided at Froedtert Memorial Lutheran and greater than 95% of the healthcare at Children's is by MCW employed physicians. So there is a lot of back and forth. So what did we do? We've been conservative. We have required vaccination for all of our employees because we really couldn't draw the line of gradation between frontline healthcare providers and people that were isolated from the healthcare environment because of the physical connectedness of our organizations. We have, from very early in the pandemic, required masks for everyone on campus. That's going to change June 6th, and I'll talk a little bit more about the cadence and the thinking that went into that. And we did choose June 6th really to jive with our commencement activities, particularly here in Milwaukee. We're going to have literally thousands of people in the Milwaukee Theater, and we're going to have over 100 of our 50-year grads from the last 3 classes that are going to be in the facility, and many of them are octogenarians. And we had told people that we were going to enforce masks at the event, and many are planning to come from all over the country. So we did not want to pivot at the last minute. And so all of our commencement events will be over as of June 6th. Our policies have largely been accepted by our employees. There are some dissenters, as you would expect, with so many people working here and in an academic environment. The dissenting voices have become louder and more insistent over the last few months. Probably not a surprise. This is a polarizing issue. And that's something that I had to factor in as a leader of our organization. The next slide, please. So I want to dig a little deeper. In March of 2020, as I said, it was pretty easy to know what to do. We had prepared to protect our core business functions and move them off-site into hybrid and virtual work environments. We pivoted very quickly and very effectively, but we also had to do the same thing for our learners and for clinical care. We restricted access to our campuses only to business essentiality. For the roles, we really had a lot of people start working from home who had never done that before. We mandated face masks and distancing. We stopped food service within our facilities, at least early in the pandemic, when there was concern that there may be foodborne transmission of COVID-19. We limited our room capacity to a third of the posted capacity, and that correlated pretty well with the 6-foot social distancing guidelines that the CDC was talking about. We also paid very special attention to optimizing our HVAC and the traffic flows within our facilities. We did suspend non-essential healthcare. That was not our decision. That was a decision by Health and Human Services imposed on all healthcare organizations, which posed a lot of challenges for us. We had to pivot to virtual clinical care settings for non-critical healthcare services. We stopped university-sponsored in-person events. Many of our big fundraisers were scheduled for that part of the year, and we had to cancel. And we had huge financial challenges associated with the suspension of non-critical healthcare. Fortunately, in May of 2020, some in-person clinical care was restored, and we did not at the time, in retrospect, have huge burdens of COVID-19 that were overwhelming our healthcare facilities, at least not in mid-2020. Next slide, please. We did have to furlough employees, over 700 people, such a hard decision for us to make. But we went from projecting a $40 million revenues in excess of expenses for that fiscal year to projecting a potential $100 to $125 million loss. So we had some very severe financial mitigations that we needed to implement extraordinarily quickly. So furloughs were part of that. We did pledge to our employees that we would do everything possible to bring them back to work within 3 months to preserve jobs. And we did a pretty good job of that. Most of our people did come back, but we had other financial mitigations, salary withholds for everyone, with a sliding scale, with the largest burden being assumed by the people at the high end of the earnings scale. And we had travel restrictions. For people that were on incentive comp, we withheld those incentives. We were eventually able to restore a large part of those as part of our financial recovery, but it was really a pretty frightening and challenging time for us there in the early months of the pandemic. In September of 2020, we did restore limited food service, single serve packaging. In limited amounts, we allowed individuals from behind plexiglass shields to serve to our people, but we did not have buffets and open service. We did return most of our furloughed employees. And in December 2020, we stood up one of 9 Pfizer vaccine sites throughout the state of Wisconsin. And this was an all-volunteer effort in our education space in the hub building at MCW. And MCW does not operate clinics. Those are done by Freighter and by Children's. So this was a huge lift for us. Hundreds of MCW faculty, staff, and learners participated in this clinic. We gave 20,000 doses out. We believe we did this equitably. We were one of the first and only healthcare providers that reached out to non-affiliated providers in the community and offered vaccinations to them. Many of the other sites focused primarily on their employees. We also reached into communities of color to make sure that we were equitably distributing that very precious resource in the early months of the pandemic. As we got into April and recognized that the availability of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines was better, and that the vaccines were less fragile than we thought they could be, we knew that there were more sites that could do a better job of administering the vaccines. Then in July 2021, we made a very difficult decision to require mandatory vaccination for all of our employees and learners. The rationale was that we were taking care of some of the most vulnerable people in our communities, that they expected a higher standard from us as healthcare providers than they might from MCW as an educational institution, and that we really were having extraordinary difficulty deciding who was a healthcare provider and who wasn't, because our people interacted frequently with each other in the healthcare settings and also in MCW education spaces. That was hard. We lost about 60 employees. Most of them were part-time casual workers. but we lost some that were business essential, in particular in our animal facilities and vivarium. We lost a lot of our animal caretakers, and it posed a real challenge for us. None of our frontline healthcare providers left the organization because of the vaccine mandates, but it was painful. Some of our longstanding employees who were doing valuable work left because of that vaccine mandate. We also had a robust exemption process and had about 100 out of our 8,000 stakeholders receive exemptions, and most of those still have chosen not to be vaccinated. If I go to the next slide, please. In April of 2022, we increased our room capacity to 50% of the posted capacity as we came out of the Omicron wave. We restored limited on-campus job interviews. And if you think about it, as a large employer, it was very difficult for us to hire a workforce without actually bringing them to campus, because we, like many of the large businesses in the region, recruit nationally. In May 2022, we started allowing plated food, not buffets yet, but we increased our room capacity to 100% of the posted capacity. And then looking forward in June, on June 6th, we'll highly recommend but not require masks, except for our 100 or so unvaccinated individuals who will be required to wear high quality masks. And that means no cloth masks, either KF94s, N95s, or surgical masks on our campus. On-campus interviews will be allowed. We'll bring visiting professors to campus to give in-person presentations. Outside visitors and family members can come to campus, and we will allow outside organizations to use our facilities. And we're really happy to do that because we believe that we should share our wealth and with our communities, and that includes our physical facilities. And we will allow buffet food starting in June. Next slide, please. So this is complicated. We tried to communicate consistently. The task force was challenged to provide clear communications that were packed with the necessary information, especially when you're in an academic environment where people want to know what the science is and how you made the decision and who made the decision. This is just a tiny slice of the matrix that we posted for our department administrators. And as you can see, it's complicated, and it wasn't anything easily translated to busy workforce. So that was a challenge for us. If I could go to the next slide, please. We tried to simplify things by providing graphical timelines, but even just looking at this, it doesn't capture all of the decisions that we made over this 3 or 4 month stretch here in the second quarter of 2022. So I want to circle back to the communication challenges that we've all had, and that maybe more than anything else has been and will continue to be our most daunting challenge. If I could go to the next and last slide. I just want to talk a little bit about just some factors to consider. Everybody has a unique circumstance. They need to balance a lot of things, that the needs of their customers and how they interact with them. The same with the employees, balancing the safety of vulnerable individuals with the desire of people to be interacting with each other face to face, how frequently people interact for your core business functions, the physical layout of your workspace, ventilation. What is the feasibility of actually reducing the workplace density? So if you worked in a chicken processing plant or a meat processing plant, you can't reduce the density. It's just not possible. For example, your culture, what will it accommodate? The connectivity and engagement and how important that is. And one of the things we learned throughout the pandemic is our students were lonely, our faculty and staff providers were feeling isolated and under huge stress, and they missed being able to interact with each other. And then trying to reinvent your organization and consider whether virtual and hybrid options are part of your future. I would say at MCW they are. We were planning to spend $50 million on a parking deck. We may not have to do that now because a significant portion of our workforce is coming in part-time or they're working entirely from their homes. And so my pitch to our people is I'd rather spend that $50 million on people and programs than on a parking deck or a building. So if I can go to the next slide. These are the data sources that we use. And I just want to say thank you so much for your attention. And thanks to the MMAC for being a really good partner in trying to really maneuver over the last couple of years through this difficult interface between the economy and health. Chris, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, Dr. Raymond, we appreciate your leadership during this time as well. And I think it's interesting to hear you run through this because in this context here, we think of you as sort of the scientist and expert who's walking us through the worldwide and nationwide, statewide and county responses, but also you're wearing the employer hat. And how challenging has that aspect been for you? It sounds like very challenging.
Yes, it is challenging and it's going to continue to be.
Right.
And, especially now with people being fatigued, with messages being overinterpreted, maybe not in the right way from the CDC about their risk calculator, that people really want to get back together. And again, we're weighing that with the fact that more and more contagious variants are emerging. We in the US do not have good uptake either of completion of the first course of the vaccines, and especially the boosters. We are lagging way behind other developed countries, and only a third of our people have gotten boosted. And we're seeing a growing challenge now with people that were vaccinated with a full course of vaccine, but not a booster, starting to have diminishing protection from COVID-19. And if you look at the Omicron surge, and there was an article in the Journal Sentinel just last week about this, the difference between vaccinated and unvaccinated in terms of bad outcomes, so hospitalizations and death, is shrinking over time. And so if you want to get that 10 to 20-fold protection, that reduction in your likelihood of death, really now it's the time, if you're not boosted, to get a booster.
That's a great point. A good question from the audience here. Will a significant uptick in cases change your plans to loosen restrictions?
They might, but I think, at this point in the pandemic, and MCW has tried hard to not weigh in on policy decisions, other than our own. I think we really do need to pivot more to personal responsibility than mandates. Obviously, employers in certain sectors may need to really react more quickly to an uptick, and again, healthcare would be one. But again, even though we've been very stringent, and I'm personally very conservative and have actually been criticized by some of our people for that, I do think it's time to try to educate people, depoliticize the conversation about masks. Look, they work. They work if people wear them properly and enough people wear them. They're not perfect. They're not an impervious barrier, but they're a pretty good layer. But pivoting to personal responsibility, in my opinion, is where we're going to need to be for the remainder of the pandemic.
Got another question from the audience about the arrival of summer festival season and concerts and sports games to go to and all these great things that we love so much here in our community. It's real simple. What should people do? And I know that's a hard question to answer, but I think it's what everybody wants to know.
Assess your own personal level of comfort with the risk. So the risk of outdoor activities is low, but it's not zero. And if you're crowded in a queue to get your fried donut, or fried dough at the state fair, or your cream puffs, you might want to put a mask on, even if you're outdoors. If you're at the Pfizer Forum for the next Bucks victory, which I know we need and will happen, you might want to wear a mask, especially if you are not boosted and you're in a vulnerable population. But again, that's a personal choice. And it is time for us to resume some semblance of interaction with each other in the workplace and socially, and we recognize that. But again, it just gets back not just to personal responsibility, but personal choice about what risks you want to take.
Yeah, a couple minutes left here. Question, I've heard you talk a little bit about potential reformulation for vaccines, either this fall for new strains or somewhere down the road to attack what you call the ball of the coronavirus. Could you go through that a little bit?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. This is really important. We're lucky that, first of all, that we had mRNA technology that was available because these vaccines with mRNA technology have proven to be better than the more traditional vaccines. But they were raised with a virus that was circulating in early January of 2020. That virus isn't circulating anymore. COVID-19 has gone through many mutations, many more difficult lineages have emerged, and it's continuing to mutate. So at some point, the protection that we get from the spike protein vaccines isn't going to be what we need, and we're already seeing some diminishing protection. So for this fall, I hope that the vaccine manufacturers will do what we do every year for the flu shot, which is to reformulate the antigen, not change any of the other ingredients, but the sequence of the protein. This shouldn't cause alarm. People shouldn't be talking about huge risks. We do this every year with the flu shot. We can do the same thing with COVID-19. That would be with the spike protein. The problem with the spike protein, though, is it changes. It's a hypervariable region of the virus. There are other parts of the virus that don't change very much. So as you said, the ball or the capsid of COVID-19 doesn't mutate very much. And the spike proteins are stuck to that ball. So if we could raise antibodies that work against that capsule, maybe we could get more durable immunity and we wouldn't have to change the formulation very much. That isn't feasible to do this year, but I'm hoping next year that the vaccines that are available will be hybrids using the spike protein and also the capsule.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time and your perspective on this, Dr. Raymond. And thank you for being so transparent with the process you've gone through at the medical college. I know it has not been easy, but we do appreciate your leadership on several fronts.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.